So the Italian Normans had come to Italy in 1017. So that's like 36 years prior, something like that. And basically, they came as mercenaries and they originally came and worked for the Lombards. So southern Italy at the time was very fractured, and it had been actually in a very sort of fractured political state for really centuries prior. There had been various Muslim incursions. The Muslims at the time that the Normans arrived had owned Sicily. They basically controlled the entire island of Sicily. The Lombards are sort of a leftover from Charlemagne's time, but they had sort of and there obviously is the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire. For the sake of this discussion, I'll refer to them as the Byzantines because I always find it confusing referring to them as the Romans when we're talking separately about Romans in Rome. But the Byzantine Empire also controlled various fragments of southern Italy. And so you have the Lombards have some of it, the Papal States have some of it, the Byzantines have some of it, and the Muslims have Sicily. And within what the Muslims control, there's three separate factions who basically split up and decide to start fighting each other. So, and at the same time as raiding the rest of southern Italy. So it's a very fractured, contentious area at the time. And so the Normans show up as mercenaries for the Lombards, essentially. They meet this Lombard duke who had been deposed essentially by the Byzantines. And he says, hey, check it out. There's, the weather here is great. We have citrus fruit, Italian women. Why don't you stay and fight? And they said, well, that sounds great, but there's only a handful of us. They were coming back from a pilgrimage, and they said, we'll be back in the spring. And they were. So they came back in the spring with a bunch of them, several hundred of them, and everything went great. For the first year, there was a disastrous battle the second year where all of them, but about 10 of them died. But the Normans just didn't care, I guess, and they kept coming. And so that was the only battle actually in Italy that the Normans lost, if I recall correctly, was that battle in 1018 at the site of Cannae, which is the site of the famous Roman battle. But after that, they were basically invulnerable. You could not beat them because they had really perfected this heavy cavalry charge, which took everybody essentially by surprise. And they didn't really have a good counter for it. So they essentially, in coming as mercenaries, they became sort of the preeminent muscle of the peninsula. And they worked either for the Lombards, sometimes they worked for the Byzantines, they worked for whoever was kind of paying, and they kind of moved back and forth. And the heavy cavalry charge was so dominant, and so many more Normans kept coming, that Normans ended up being, after about 10 years, Normans were essentially like on the both sides of every conflict. And so whoever won, those Normans would essentially negotiate like a good deal for the Normans who had been captured on the other side. So the Normans would always sort of like escape every battle totally fine. And, everyone else was sort of paying the Normans and, winning or losing, I guess, depending on how fortune went.